Welcome to this week's podcast. Just gonna say it. This is a good one. Blake Wyland from the Tone Mob podcast. Good friend, involved with a lot of cool stuff. I'm going to apologize in advance. He had bad internet that day, so we didn't have video. So I figured out a workaround. So this one you might just throw on some headphones and listen, but he gives us a lot of insight into a new pedal that he just released, which is really cool. Talks about working with string joy because that's part of his life as well, and pretty much what you have to do to make it in podcast land, which is new to me. Obviously, the YouTube channel is my main focus, but this podcasting is so fun. So, without further ado, let's get going with some Blake Wyland from Tone Mob Podcast. So this is what I was working on while you were gone, although you probably can't see it because it's all glitchy. But I got me a Loop Deck CT. Yeah, it's
I can kind of see it. It's
yeah.
a little blurry, but I can kind of see it.
Yeah. So for video editing and Photoshop and Lightroom and streaming stuff like this, so I can like change, various views and do sound effects and all that stuff. So I got it mainly for Final Cut, but
Okay.
yeah,
Makes sense. Yeah.
because I'm
That's awesome.
editing hours and hours a day. So in Tone Mob world, you've been busy.
Oh man. I've been very busy, and it's not really gonna slow down, and I'm not really complaining about it, It's
Yeah.
it's a lot. It's a lot, but I'd way rather that than have nothing to do. So I'm not going to complain about it, It's all good stuff. It's the good kind of busy.
So for those of my viewers who don't know who you are, although I think this is probably more the other way around, Tone Mob podcast, it's one of my favorites.
Thank you.
And also is it Chasing Tone podcast that you do with the guys from Wampler?
Wampler. Yep. Chasing Tone. Yep.
My two favorite. They're so fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, really fun. And then what else does Blake Wyland do? Because I don't think anybody really knows.
There was actually an Ultimate Guitar article recently, not specifically about me, but I was mentioned in it about guitar podcasts, and they did a pretty good job of summing it up. They said they mentioned 60 Cycle Hum, and they said Ryan Burke is a popular YouTuber, also has this off the back of his podcast kind of is where that launched.
Yeah.
And then for me, they said, and Blake Wyland of the Tone Mob does a little bit of everything. And I think that's pretty accurate. But primarily they did mention some of the key points, which are the podcast, obviously, Instagram content, just lots and lots of Instagram content of all varieties.
Right.
And then what else did they talk about? They talked about my String Joy affiliation. I'm a partner in that company. And then the Chasing Tone podcast, which is another thing I do. And also I've slowed down on this a little bit. I still do a tiny bit, but social media and general marketing consulting for gear companies was a big driver for me for a long time. But like I said, I've backed off of some of that now, and I'm trying to focus on my own stuff and projects and other things that are, coming down the pipeline. So hopefully I can talk about those more publicly soon. There's always something in the works.
Yeah. So the latest thing you had to keep secret for a long time was this pizza situation.
Yeah. Ironically, my son just had a drum lesson last night, and his drum instructor was asking me about it. I don't know if you can see this because of our internet situation, but we'll try.
Nope.
The slice of pie. So for people who can hear this, slice of pie is a pedal that I did with big ear pedals that you talked about on your news segment. But as any listeners of my podcast know, I'm obsessed with pizza. I love pizza. Grant from Big Ear Pedals is also obsessed with pizza. Well, Grant and Karen both, actually. I think Grant might be slightly more into it, but Karen loves it too. And she she actually ate the slice that was the photo of the piece of pizza. So there's a picture. She took a picture of like the most perfect looking pepperoni pizza for the slice of pie pedal. And then there's a picture that she has. I don't know if we've posted it anywhere yet, of where she actually ate the slice that became the slice. Like her lunch is like the most famous lunch in the world at this point, I think, in the guitar world anyway.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And it's a fuzz.
It's a fuzz, yeah. And you can infer what it's based on from the name and the shape of it
Yep.
if you get extra gear nerdy. But it really did kind of, that's what the roots of it are, but it became its own thing, over time. It's definitely that in spirit, but I've never heard another one quite like that. Zach from Mythos Pedals helped with the foundation of the design and the layout and everything. And that guy's got great ears. He's an amazing dude. And then Grant and Karen actually sat down together and they like swapped parts out and was like, what about this? What do you think of this? And then there were some other people from the Nashville area. This was all being done during like the early days of lockdown and stuff. So like Jonathan Diaz from the Effects Loop and I can't even remember everybody. Jesse Rue from Rude Tech helped with the actual design of the case. AWOL Pedals helped build some and listen to some early prototypes. There's just so many people that were involved in making this thing a reality. Jacob and the team at F5 Metalworks did the actual print and powder coat on it, which is obviously a huge part of the finished product. And it's printed on 3 sides. They had to make some special jigs to hold them in place for the printer. And it was like a 20-month process to get this done. Just, it seems kind of silly to put that much effort and time into something, but we couldn't be happier with how it came out, and the response to it's been awesome too.
So is this well, first of all, yeah, the product launch and the marketing side of it I thought was great. There have been numerous small pedal companies that don't do it that well. I mean,
Right.
I thought it was fun, and I really dug it. Is this going to be like a permanent part of Big Ear, or is it a limited thing, or what?
As long as people are interested, we're going to keep producing them. Most of my collaborations have been limited, but this has such universal appeal, and there's people outside of the gear, the normal quote unquote gear world that are just more normal players, for lack of a better term. Like my dad, I always point to him as an example of this. He doesn't pay attention to the pedal world and what's launching and everything, but he plays guitar and he likes guitar. I think this has some appeal for a lot of those people who they may find it years down the road. They may see it on some board and it sounds good to them and they like the fun concept. So yeah, we're going to keep it around for as long as it makes sense to keep around. Basically, like any product, they all have a life cycle, and I'm sure it'll be gone at some point, but that we're going to plan to keep it in production as long as physically possible.
No, that's awesome. I just didn't know if it was going to be like 500 and it's done, or 200 and it's done, or stuff like that.
Yeah, we made the initial batch was 500, and we're still working through that, but they're almost gone. But there's already plans to keep them. We're just going to keep them in production as consistently as possible.
So something else that I dig about this, probably one of the only products to come out so far in the last year that you could more or less order and get like when it came out. I don't know about you, but I'm getting really tired of, hey, here's the new product. Oh yeah, it's going to be back ordered until October.
It's very annoying. I understand it is kind of just the way the world is.
Yeah.
And I don't I'm not going to hate on anybody for doing that because I super understand.
Yeah. Me
I
too.
super get what's going on. But we worked really hard to have that not be the case with this. That was a huge part of why it took so long, because we did want to just have everything ready to rock and roll as soon as people saw it, they could get it. They ship out within a few business days, and that was a big push. That's because it is kind of annoying.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm
So,
trying to keep all my handmade stuff to like 2 to 3 weeks out,
mm-hmm.
and for hand, you order a set of pickups and I make them to order. So I figure 2 to 3 weeks is okay, but that's that's hard keeping it right there. These days.
Yes, definitely. And these are Grant and Karen and actually some of the Jesse Rue from Rude Tech, A-Wall Pedals is when they're Aaron Wall. He's been there helping, and there's been a very conscious effort to try to keep it in immediately shippable status,
Yeah.
basically. But I mean, it's been really, really, really hard just getting the parts, getting the having the right powder coat in stock, having whatever. It's just ugh. it. It's been so much more challenging this year than even during deep lockdown. Just because I've actually talked about this with a few people. I think basically when everything locked down, this is just my theory, I don't know this for a fact. I think we basically siphoned off all of the suppliers, the mid-level suppliers had stock, and then we siphoned all that off. So we didn't really see in the guitar world parts availability diminish that much during the early days. But sales were so high for every manufacturer, basically. We basically sucked the inventory dry from the suppliers, but the raw materials suppliers were also locked down during that time. So they weren't producing stuff to keep up. They weren't producing even like silicon for chips. They weren't producing iron and aluminum. Like those places were shut down, not to the same degree as everywhere else, but significantly reduced. And now we're just in this several year period of catch up across industries. I think that's a lot of what has happened.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that there are like priority industries. I know, like with copper, for example, so pickup wire, because that's my thing.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say I go through, I don't know, 5 or 10 pounds a month, which is a couple hundred pickups.
Yeah.
Boeing or one of those places is going through the same gauge wire, but like tons. And so if I call my company and be like, I need 10 pounds of 42 so I can, I'm not on the priority list. So that's the other thing. Like some of these more niche-y industries, we're kind of getting knocked down the totem pole. If I could,
Totally.
I can, yeah, okay. I won't say totem. I don't. We'll talk about that later. I try not to say that anymore, even though I'm Native American. But
Right.
whatever.
Ah,
Anyway,
I get it. I get it.
yeah,
That's 100% true. A lot of people don't realize they saw when Tom Cram came on my podcast. Tom Cram was the person essentially responsible for reviving the DoD brand of pedals, and he worked with Digitech while they were owned by Harman, which is owned by Samsung, and then even though sales were really strong and he did an amazing job reviving that brand, they just shut it down. Samsung just was like, this, even though this brand is doing well for us currently, it's not worth our time.
right.
It's not worth our headache because we're Samsung.
Yeah,
like, like that's the guitar pedal industry is so small, and the guitar industry in general, even at the highest levels. I mean, I got a report I question its accuracy a little bit for a few reasons, but I got a report from Music Trades about the revenue numbers from the top MI companies in 2020, and at the top of the list was Shure at, I can't remember, I think a little around 800 million, which is a lot. That's a big company, but not compared to Samsung. That's like a tiny
No.
division of Samsung.
Yes.
That's so
Yeah. What was Fender, like 730 million or something?
some something. They were number 2, and they were in that ballpark. So
Yeah.
like 2 of the biggest companies in the game are a line item to a cell phone company.
Yeah. They don't even move the needle in most industries. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Exactly. Yeah. So then you filter that all the way down to me working out of a bedroom in my house, and
Right.
doing what you do. It's like, you know, even a company like the size of Stringjoy uh, is so small when you're talking about the amount of raw materials, even as
Yes.
much as they're growing,
Mm-hmm.
in comparison.
Yeah. Yeah, and Stringjoy, it goes through, it's kind of astonishing how much stuff we go through. And then we sit back and go, like, we're still like the smallest brand that's actually manufacturing in the
Yep.
US. There's white label brands that are smaller than us at this point, which that's kind of, that makes sense, right?
Right.
But we're like the smallest brand that's actually winding stuff outside of maybe 2 or 3 other companies, and we go through a lot of material. So to extrapolate that out to some of the bigger guys, it's like, it's hard to even mentally process it sometimes how much
Yeah.
they have to go through. And then even still, they're small potatoes in the realm of raw materials. They're not Boeing, for example.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you zoom out a little bit and you say, okay, like your wire for strings or my wire for pickups, the dies and the equipment, they're doing all that stuff in runs too. So it's like, we have to use these machines to make this other wire for this other industry, and we only have a limited amount of raw materials to make it. So guitar string wraps are going to have to like be a back seat to whatever somebody else is doing. So it just goes all the way up the chain. It's crazy because
Yep.
that's the problem that, well, the whole guitar industry is going to have, well, starting now with like tubes and
Yeah.
magnets, like, because those industries are shifting, it's going to make it tougher.
100%. I think a lot of the consumers of the guitar market, and it's getting better, but a lot of the consumers of the guitar market don't realize how small it is.
Yeah.
Despite so many people talking about it and talking about it and talking about it, it's hard to wrap your mind around as say you're somebody that's making, average wage, whatever that is. So you hear about a company like Fender doing 730 million, you're like, wow, that's a big company. It is a big company in this niche, but it's so small in comparison. Like, we think about, I used to work in the oil industry, and the company I worked for, 730 million was like, yeah, that's one of our facilities does that in 6 months.
Right.
It's just such a different thing. The scales are so tipped, but the difference with the guitar market is that's all public. You can tell, it looks like Fender's a big company, and they are a big company. I'm not trying to say they're not. It's just, they're just small by comparison to other industries. When humans have a hard time processing numbers. Once you get over 1,000, it's kind of like it's all the same. I know that's not entirely true, but mentally you kind of start to gloss over after it's like, yeah, I don't know what the point is. 500,000 is the same as 5 million, in our
Right.
brains, even though it's vastly different.
Yep. That's why it's really fun to still have, and one thing as I'm glad about over the last 2 years is there are more people that are like, well, you made 500 pedals. You're going to make however many more. You don't have 3,000 employees to feed. You don't have to worry about it. So you can like slow down and be creative and make the pedal look like pizza. Like,
Right.
so in a way, all of us small potatoes are kind of keeping the thing alive, because on the creative, not overly business sense side of stuff, you know.
Definitely. We have the flexibility to be able to do that. Uh, could a big company do something like that? Sure, they could, but they have so many other factors they have to consider.
Right.
You know, we basically went, is this going to be fun? Do we think it's going to be viable for Big Ear and for myself? And the answer was like, yeah, I think it will be. It'll be hard, but it will be viable. Whereas somebody at Gibson, Fender, what insert bigger company here, it may not be worth the resources when they can put that
Right.
into something that has more mass appeal. So the smaller builders like you and like Big Ear, they have the ability to be flexible and fun, whereas some of the bigger outlets don't, because and it's not a bad thing, it's just reality. They have a lot of mouths to feed, and they got to ensure that the volume of their output is going to feed those people. That's what they have to do. So
Yeah.
it's just the way the world works.
One of the things we started to do, well, I was trying to figure out, like, okay, I can get 4 or 10 or 20 of a particular kind of part. And I was getting kind of annoyed with it, because I was like, I'd really like to add this product to my, catalog, but the supply chain is so messed up. So I flipped it. I was like, okay, we can only get 20 of these pickup covers right now, and then they're on back order for like 8 months. All right, well, let's just make it into a little short run and just tell people we only have 20 of them. Boom, they're gone in like 6 hours. Definitely. So, let's just make them special, because they are special, because you can't get them. So let's just tell people that, because it's not a lie. It's totally true. I can only get this many. And then allow that to feed some. So the scarcity is like feeding some creativity in my brain, to make that work. And it's working.
Yeah. No, that's very true. The thing is about these times, you find out, who's willing to fight for the thing that they love to do. Some people are willing to just be like, well, I guess that's that, and it's not going to work for me anymore. And that's fine. That's okay. I'm not saying this as a knock on anybody either. It's literally just clarifying who wants it bad enough. Years ago, at one of my first NAMMs, might have been my second, I heard a smaller pedal builder come up to Josh Scott and say, if you had advice for one small builder, to get to like your status where you're at, and even JHS, like as successful as that company is, even they're tiny in comparison.
Yes.
But they're a very successful brand. Josh is a really smart guy. They asked him, like, what would you do? You've been at this a long time. And he said, number one thing, stick around. Just stick around. That's hard enough. If you can stick around, you'll be doing better than most people in this industry. And he's 100% right about that. And I think you can extrapolate that to other industries and professions too. But being a small builder in this niche is tough. It's really tough to make it work. If you can make it work, it's one of the most rewarding jobs in the world, but it's very difficult.
I had the same conversation. It's funny we were talking about this right now, because I want to say, when was your first NAMM?
2015 or 16. I can't remember.
Okay. Yeah. So I started this company in 2011 or 2012, right in there. And my first NAMM, I think, was your first NAMM.
Okay.
And at that NAMM, I met Anthony Sims from Lucky Dog Guitars out of Cleveland, Tennessee. He makes those really unique, really pretty Telecaster type stuff.
Yeah.
And we were talking, we're good friends now, and we were talking probably about 6 months ago. And he's like, if you walked around in your mind at that show in 2015 or whatever it was, and then walk around in your mind again, who would be there this year? Not by choice, but who actually exists anymore. It's less than a handful of
Right.
small companies that like survived. But we had to fight. I mean, you know, he almost lost everything a couple times. One of the times because wasn't his choice, you know. Fender's pretty powerful, but you know, that kind of stuff is, you got to fight through it and make it go. And even for somebody like you with what you do, I don't think people understand also, it's not just you and Scott went and started a string company. It's you're always right now doing like 10 different things just to keep the lights on. Like,
yes.
Me too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We talked about that last time you came on my podcast. It was like, it's just, and I think some people might take this as complaining. It's not. It's just explaining the reality of the situation. You know, there's most people I know that do anything related to music for a living, even up to some very famous, you know, well-known musicians. They do multiple things to keep the lights on. Maybe some of it's outside of music, you know. So I used the example yesterday. I was actually talking to a classroom of kids in a very similar situation to this, and you know, they had a lot of questions, and one of them was like, of all the people you know that's doing music related stuff for a living, how many of them just do that? And I'm like, phew, almost none. Like, even I use the example of Maynard from Tool. Like, even that guy in one of the most popular bands on the planet has a winery. You know, I know he does it because he loves it. He doesn't have to. But my point is, like, that's the type of person he is. He could just go home and chill when he's not on tour. He could.
I've actually been to his place in Jerome, Arizona, and
there you go.
Had lunch with him and tried his wine, and
nice.
Yeah. Interesting fellow, Maynard.
Exactly. But you can see, like, that's just how he's wired. Actually, I interviewed Brahm, who does the YouTube videos under Pedalscopic Sounds, and he's from the wine industry. And he said he sat down with him in that capacity one time as a rep for a distributor. And he was like, it's so funny because, like, I've watched this guy play. I love his band. And here he is so excited about getting forklift certified so he can drive around crates of grapes at this winery and stuff, you know? All that to say is, like, most of the people who are successful in the music industry have multiple things going on, whether they need to or not. It just kind of tells you about the mental state you have to be in to make this work. Josh Scott, another good example. Like, he's got the pedal business, but if you look at the amount of output he does content-wise, he's a full-time YouTuber as well at this point. You know, that's, and then with very high production value and a lot going on. So, like, there's that. Brian Wampler, you know, he's got his pedal company, but Chasing Tone's a big deal to him. You know, and he does videos and stuff as well. You do the pickups, and you're also a full-time YouTuber at the same time, basically. So, like, there's so many examples you can point to of, hey, if you want to make it work in the music industry, you're going to have to do a bunch of different stuff.
Oh, yeah.
That's just, you're going to have to run live sound and know how to engineer a recording and also probably play something. You know, you're going to you're going to have to do all kinds of stuff. And I think that it hasn't really been talked about that much. Most people think of a rock star, they think of him as a rock star.
Yeah.
And that rock star probably has a bunch of different stuff going on at this point.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the really successful ones, like, let's say you know, okay, maybe not like Mick Jagger, but like, okay, one level below that. I don't know who I could think of, but
Kiss.
Nah, maybe below them. What I'm thinking of is, okay, Rob Zombie.
Okay, yeah, good point.
he's making movies. People like him. Machine Gun Kelly owns restaurants. Like
Yeah.
they're very famous. They have a bunch of money, but they know it's almost like a football player or a hockey player. It's like they know, okay, if I get my face bashed in, I have better have something, you know,
Mhm.
uh, not a backup, but kind of a backup, you know.
It's diversification,
Yeah,
really. That's
exactly.
what it is. And if you look at, you can even extrapolate this further. Most people who are successful, not everybody, of course, but most people who are successful have multiple things going on.
Oh yeah.
It's just that seems to be true no matter what industry you're talking about. It just seems especially true in the music industry, even down to the lower levels of it. You know what I mean? Like if you're, like I said, if you're a sound guy, you probably have multiple gigs. You're probably not just, there's, I'm sure Journey has their sound guy that's always their sound guy. But when you get below that, when you get to more local level, you probably are running sound for a bunch of different bands, and you probably also work part-time at the guitar store, and you probably also, it's just it seems like a constant thing with music-based activities is even at the smallest levels, you got to have multiple things going on.
And I also think that people don't realize they wake up in the morning and see me or you on YouTube or wherever and think that's just what we do. But they don't know about the 8 other businesses that I had before this one that
Mm-hmm.
were building blocks to get here. And they were just as much getting up early and staying up late as this is. And this is working. And that's actually more work than any of that stuff was,
Right.
so I never Google my own name anymore. I don't do it because, you inevitably see a Reddit something or other where you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't seen that.
Yeah.
For some reason, I don't know if I had to or I was looking at something the other day and a Reddit thread came up and it was like, our Dylan pickup's good. Has anybody tried them? Blah, blah, blah. And the very first comment that I kind of like accidentally saw was they can't be that good because he's a YouTuber. And if he's any good at being a YouTuber, that's a full-time job. And there's no way to manage both of those things. And I'm like, yeah, there is. It's called get up earlier and stay up later. And I do it.
That's hilarious. Like, I mean, because I've said for a long time, look at the people, and we talked about this when you came on too, so sorry if this is a repeat, but look at the people who are doing well in general with consumer-facing brands. What is one thing that most of them have in common in 2022 and for several years now? They do content of
Mm-hmm.
some sort,
Yeah.
no matter what that is. It could be YouTube, it could be lots of Instagram, it could be TikTok, it could be podcasts. They do content. They
Yep.
make content. They
Yep.
make content that caters to whatever strengths they may have. Maybe some people are really good at video. Like, I'm not that good at video. I'm trying to get better. I do more, but having conversations, I am decent at. So I have lots of conversations and I record them and put them out there for people to have. So, and some people may not like it, but it's something that comes naturally to me. And I just don't see a consumer facing brand of any sort in any industry that doesn't apply to.
Nope. I met the first music based or really any retail based business who doesn't do any at all social media a couple of weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
My viewers kept saying, hey, you need to go check out this Jerry's Lefty Guitars in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
So when we were down there last time, a couple of weeks ago, I went and it's this old house behind his house. He has zero Facebook, no Instagram, no social media of any kind. His website doesn't even have a shopping cart. I mean, it's like
Okay.
you have to call him.
Mm-hmm.
You walk in there and it's like the righteous guitars of left-handed guitars.
Wow.
It's like you walk in there and there's Tom Anderson, Sir, like every McPherson, Cole Clark, and not one right-handed guitar in the whole place. Like everything from all over the world, all the boutique stuff. And he's like, it's me by myself and I can't keep up. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and he's the first person, but that's so niche that he could get away with it and just go by
Yep.
word of mouth. But you can't really do that anymore.
It's very rare. And I think in instances like that, where you are so hyper niche and specialized that you can kind of get away with some of that. I actually spoke with this with a couple amp builders. I was like, once Dumble passed away here recently, I was like, do you see a world in which another Dumble can exist anymore? And I'm like, no.
Mm-mm.
No, I don't see that happening for anybody. Sure, you could condense things down and do smaller runs, and the demand will be there for some of these brands, but I don't see another time where an amp builder in particular is going to have the ability to interview their clientele and decide whether they want to make an amp for them or not.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't There's too many options now.
Yeah.
There's too many amazing amp builders that will just build you an amp if you ask them to, for that to exist. And so, like with the left-handed guitar thing, maybe he's not doing any content, but you heard about it on the internet,
Yes.
you know?
Yes.
So I would wager that most of the demand that he is receiving probably came from somebody talking about it on the internet somewhere.
Yeah. Social media is still doing what social media does for him. That's without him initiating it.
Exactly. And most people can't get away with that, as you noted.
Yeah,
it just
exactly.
doesn't happen. Plus, how long has he been doing it? That's the other question. Like, has he been around
15 years?
So, that time in market, that's actually something Scott and I from Stringjoy we were talking about yesterday. Especially in the guitar market, time in marketplace seems to be, and this goes back to Josh Scott's comment, that seems to be so crucial for this industry. Literally just being around and being available means something, even though it maybe shouldn't. But like, I think it does, because you always hear of these fly-by-night builders that like, all right, Billy's guitars are the best guitars on the planet, and then Billy's guitars received some insane demand, and now Billy can't keep up, and now Billy's starting to not fulfill orders, and Billy, oh no, what? I haven't been able to get a hold of Billy for 6 months. What happened to Billy's guitars? They were the best thing ever. Oh, they're gone now.
Yep.
That happens all the time. So I think that's part of the reason people they know if they go buy a Gibson, that Gibson's probably going to be around.
Yeah.
If they go buy a PRS is probably going to be around to support it, and they're probably going to fulfill it because they have a reputation for doing so. Billy's guitars, maybe not so much. I don't know if there's a real Billy's guitars. I apologize for using your name. If there is a real Billy's guitars, I'm sure they're wonderful if that actually exists. But time in marketplace is really crucial for the guitar market and brands in the guitar market.
And understanding scalability too, because Billy's guitars, if he's making some wacky thing that takes him a bajillion hours and he sells 5 of them, well, he doesn't have 5 bajillion hours now to even make those guitars, and then he's done. I really concern myself, and I don't want to say worry, but those two things, what you just mentioned and the scalability thing, are kind of, they're crossing for me right now. Like,
right,
we've been around for X amount of years, and I really feel like that 2021 into 2020 and 2021, but now 2022, I'm there. I kind of I think I just hit that mark. Like, okay, people know we're around and I'm not going anywhere. And I think they also know that it's mine and my name on it. and nobody's buying me out. There's no weird thing going to happen. It's just me. So when you order pickups, you're going to get them. But not scaling it so fast that I can't keep up. And I'm also at that point, at 200 pickups a month, one guy, I got to start thinking about that.
Right.
So it's
Right.
a balancing act for sure.
That's a really good thing that you mentioned too, because scalability is interesting. You know, you have to know yourself, and you
Yep.
have to know what you want in order to know exactly what you should do. Then that's something that a lot of businesses struggle with. And what I always point to is Analog Mike.
Yep.
I'm like, okay, he's got a 3-year waiting list for his pedals. He could, and he talked about this. This isn't private information. He talked about this on my podcast. He could scale up. He could hire a bunch of people, expand his facilities, and get that down to where you're getting King of Tones in a week. He could do that. He has the demand for it. He doesn't want to do that. He has people that have worked for him for close to 15, 20 years at this point. I'm not even sure how long, that love their job, that produce good product. He has inbuilt demand. Like, he knows every day we have this many King of Tones that we can build. That's why he knows how long his waiting list is. And he's like, I don't want to have that kind of overhead, personnel headache, the expense, the just logistical problems that come with having a big team. He likes it where it is, and he can manage it that way. Other companies, no, they want to be, boss knows they want to be boss, and they know what is required to be boss, and that requires a lot of volume, a lot of labor, a lot of overhead that somebody's going to have to manage, and they've chosen to operate their business that way. And there's neither one is right or wrong. You just have to know what's best for yourself and your personality and your wants, and try to steer your decision making towards those goals. And it sounds like you're at a point right now where you're kind of having to make that decision. Like, do I want more employees? Do I want to do it myself? What do I want to do?
So I already made the decision a long time ago. I know for sure that I don't want to have any employees. And I will say that I was very grateful because in 2017 or 18, we actually hired an architect, drew a shop and a house and the whole thing. I almost had pen to paper and I pulled the plug on the whole thing. I was like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to get that big. I don't want to. And then the pandemic happened and I'm like, so glad that, and I don't want this to come out wrong. I mean it in the most wholesome, loving way. I didn't want to be, I'm glad I was not responsible for other human beings. Like that what I was doing on a daily basis was not responsible for them starving to death because of what was going on. I was very grateful that I made those decisions. And as a result, I look at people like Analog Mike and Anthony from Lucky Dog, who he's about 3 years out too. And they're making like 12 guitars a month. And he's like 3 years out. And I'm like, I want to do that. That's where I want to get. I want to get this to where we're always making pickups and we're always making people smile with the sound. But I want it to be an enjoyable thing that people look forward to having. I don't want to become a commodity. I don't want to be Seymour Duncan. I just like your pedals. You did it because you loved it and you know that people will love it and the people that own them will appreciate them. If it got any bigger than that, it would just be a job. And
Right.
I can scale YouTube. I can scale the podcast. I can scale all that stuff and make a living. That's in my mind and heart to do. But this, even though it is my living right now, I want to keep it like a
Manageable.
love thing. And,
Yeah.
so yeah.
And it's a balancing act. It's real easy to, get big eyes. It's like, hey, this dealer came along and they're like, we can sell 250 of your pickups a month. And it's like, ooh, that sounds pretty cool. But then, like, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
What does that pencil out to? And a lot of people get distracted by that. Like, cool, that's X amount of dollars a month. It's like, but is it really? You
Yes.
know, I know some companies. I won't name any names because that would not be nice. But there are some very large companies and very small companies that the owners end up taking home the same amount of money.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so you have to pay attention to that too. Like, sometimes more isn't more, depending
Well,
on how many people are dipping into the pot on the way there.
and let me tell you, I just spent the last 2 years living in a motorhome, driving around the country, doing whatever I wanted to do. If I make any more pickups than I'm making right now, it will cut into how much fun my life is. And I'm not starving to death, so I don't want to allow that to happen. Like, you have to think
Mm-hmm.
about quality of life. Like, you're constantly growing and do more stuff, but you still have time to go pick your kids up at school and like be a
Right.
dad. And there are other priorities outside of the business as far as quality of life goes. And for people that are just really trying to be real people and not just CEO of Boeing, um, you got to look at that stuff too.
It's all a factor, right?
Yep.
There are times where you have to take a step back and look at what you're doing and look at the end result. And this just kind of goes into back to the knowing yourself thing. I bring
Yeah.
this up a lot because it's the most pertinent example that I have for me. My dad worked for himself for about 10, 12 years when I was growing up. He didn't like it. He will tell you openly he wasn't good at it. Like, it wasn't good for him. He was the type of or is the type of person that is more comfortable punching a clock. And then when he's off work, he doesn't worry about it anymore. He leaves it all at work, comes back to work the next day, does his thing. Where I am the type of person that makes me extremely uncomfortable because I like control. I like to be able to, like, hey, if my family's doing something on Saturday, can I do it? Let me check my calendar. Yep, I can do it. No problem. I don't have to ask anybody. I don't have to, like, put in a request. I can just be like, yeah, I'll do it that day because my boss told me it was okay because he's me. Um, but that does come with additional stress of, you're the one that has to make it happen. You're the one that has to bring home the bacon, so to speak. There's nobody just cutting you a paycheck in the same way. And I understand why, depending on your mental wiring, one might sound more stressful than the other. For me, being self-employed is less stressful than working for somebody else. For my dad, working for somebody else is less stressful. You just got to pay attention to your own brain and your own situation and try to do what's best for you, you know?
Yep. And if you're doing the opposite of what you should be doing, make moves. Like, even if it's
Yes.
just starting to listen to podcasts that get you in the right mindset, like, I don't care if you're 60 years old and you hate your job and you have an entrepreneurial mindset, like, start listening to some podcasts and reading some books and, like, make moves. And it might not be like a complete life-changing move in the next 90 days or anything, but I think about that with my wife because she's like, from the time she was 18 till about 9 years ago, she was in a cubicle with no windows working at a hospital billing department or something.
Mm-hmm.
And was like completely terrified to quit her job and get something different because she was that cubicle person.
Right.
And now, 9 years later of this job that she's got now, she's right in there. She's working from home and she's wouldn't have it any other way. So just understanding and learning and being willing to make those moves, even over a long period of time. I think it took us like 5 years to get everything lined up where we could go on the road and do that stuff. And then we had to make an adjustment again this year and not do that or adjust how we do that. You have to be willing to, you know, we were laying in bed the other night and Leslie says, she's like, I wonder if people think we're crazy because we've been married for not quite 10 years and we've started our life over like 3 times. And I'm like, I don't care. Like,
Right.
I don't care.
Yeah. I mean, people thought I was crazy, you know?
Yeah.
They thought I was crazy quitting, you know, like, what's a pretty stable industry? The oil industry is pretty stable as far as employment goes. Like,
Right.
it doesn't, and the guys there that work there, they're like, just come here, do a good job, and you'll never have to worry about your paycheck. And that's true. That place has been around for 120 years or whatever it is at this point. It's probably going to be there for another 120. And that, you know, some of those people thought I was had a screw loose, you know, doing what I was doing when I moved on. But I recently went back for my former supervisor's. He finally retired. Shout out Jim. I don't know if he'll see this or not, but and you know, talking to them now, they can kind of see it now that there's more to see. Because at the time, it was not totally clear. They're like, podcast, huh? You know, like, I don't understand. And now, in a weird twist of fate, my boss's son, former boss's son, works for us at Stringjoy. So it kind of like everything clicked together, you know? It was like, oh, this is a real thing that Blake's doing. You know, it is viable. And I've been gone from there for a long time now. So people did think I was crazy. And also, similarly, I didn't care. But what you talked about making moves, that's so important. Because I've told this story a million times to my listeners, but I was sitting in the parking lot of a hotel / Subway / convenience store after work one day. I just went in there and grabbed a sandwich or something, and I was just like sitting there going like, why am I not happy? Like, on paper, got a good job. Like, I love spending time with my family. That makes me happy. I'm like, what? I've got everything that I've been shooting for. And then it clicked. I was like, oh, you've got everything you've been shooting for. And you now have the self-realization that this isn't exactly what you want to do career-wise. So now what you have to do is shoot for something else. And it took a long time and a lot of effort. But if I had just kept doing, I'd still be working there right now. And like I said, I'm not hating it. It was a good job, but it wasn't good for me.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So you got to make moves. You can't sit there. If you're not happy with your current situation, I realize that this is not an option for everybody. If you're a single parent working 14 jobs trying to feed the family, that's tough. It's tougher than what I had to do to make my changes. But for a lot of people, some people are just stuck because they're stuck, not because they're actually stuck, just because they're mentally stuck. So think about those things and make those changes to the degree that it's possible, even if it's like you said, just getting your mindset right, listening to some different content, absorbing different things from different people. That can go a long ways.
I had a friend of mine, I do have a friend of mine who's a computer guy, you know, whatever he does, computer stuff. And he doesn't really like his boss. He doesn't really like his job. But because of COVID, and he would always tell me, especially when we were on the road, he's like, man, I wish I could do that. That'd be someday, you know, I'm going to do that. And I told him one day, I was like, because of COVID, you're working from home, right? And he's like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a really nice deck. And I told him, I was like, if you're working from home today, just take your laptop out and sit on your deck to work for a couple hours this afternoon. Like, use that as I'm doing something a little different, changing my perspective, changing my, my surroundings just a little bit. It would not a big move, but something within your power. Months go by and months go by. He buys an RV. He's got it sitting in his yard, and he texts me a picture of 2 monitors and his work situation inside his RV in his yard. And
Mm-hmm.
he's like, I'm trying it on for size to see if I can do it. And then he texted me. I talked to him a couple months ago, or about a month ago. And he's like, we're going to take 6 weeks this summer. We're going to travel and I'm going to try it this much. So from taking your laptop and sitting on your porch for a couple hours, these little moves,
Mm-hmm.
like
Yeah,
that's what it takes. Like
100%. I love that example. That's
it's
a
not
great
just
example.
quitting everything and upending your life. It's little moves.
I love that because a lot of people think it is. It's like we got to completely change. We're quitting. We're doing, and we're gonna start this whatever. And it's like, I worked doing the Tone Mob stuff, and at my job for like I think 2.5, 3 years at the same time. And did it suck? Yeah, it kind of sucked because I was basically working 2 full-time jobs. But at the end of the day, what was more of a risk? Like, keep this income, keep supporting my family, and trying this thing that loses money for a while in general. Like any business you start, you're probably going to lose money for a while, so you better have something else coming in. Uh, and so I did. I lost money on it for a little while until I figured out how to make it work. And once I figured out how to make it work consistently for about a year, then I felt comfortable like, okay, I can lose this now. I can quit and I can move on from there. But it was not an option for me just to be like, all right, we're flipping the switch and we're going to do this thing full time now because I think it may work. You need to test things. Your friend's smart to just like, let's see if this is going to work for me or not. Let's try it out a little bit because maybe I think I want to do it, but I don't actually want to do it.
Right.
That's okay too.
Yeah.
There's been many times where I'm like, I think that sounds fun. Like when I talked about I'm not doing as much client work these days, I thought that was going to be more fun than it was because I was like, oh, I can work on all these different projects for all these different people and get this variety of experience. But what I found is with client work, it's essentially the same as having a boss. And I don't like having a boss. So I decided that wasn't for me. Now there's other people that may love it, and that's for them.
We did that too for a while. We had a consulting company that we had for a little bit. And the reason I stopped doing it, and I've heard you talk about examples on your podcast where you're like, if you do these 5 things, this will work. And they're like, that's a lot of work. I'm like, well, just get up in the morning and do it. Mm-hmm. And they don't do it. And then they're like, why isn't this working? I'm like, you paid me to tell you what you should do. I'm not going to do it for you. Like,
right. Unless you pay me a lot more.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, or they expect, if I start a YouTube channel in 3 months, will I be making Mr. Beast money? No, you won't.
No, and neither was Mr. Beast.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Well, I'll tell you what, we are bumping on an hour. Okay. I don't have any fancy ending questions or anything.
That flew by.
You do.
That was awesome.
That was fun.
Yeah.
So I want to go over to Patreon now just for a few minutes because I know there's some other things you're interested besides music stuff. And I know you're a gearhead and I am too. So I want to dive in a little bit about that. I know you've got a car that you've got some time into. I'm interested in that. So let's chat about that over on Patreon.
Sounds good, dude.
Awesome. Dude's cool, man. Every time I hang out with him or get to chat with him or anything, he is such a cool cat, and I appreciate his company. Blake, I appreciate your time. One thing I want to mention before we go, that we moved everything on this podcast to its own channel. So you will see that in the links and everything. Please do me a favor and subscribe. We don't have like a custom URL or any of that kind of stuff yet. Please do me a favor and subscribe to that because that would be awesome. That way it doesn't kind of clog up the main channel. So I just figured we'd put the podcast. Thank you for the viewers who suggested that. That's what we're going to do. It's done. Here we are. On to the next one. Thanks for hanging out, And we'll see you in our next episode, which I already recorded and is very cool, but I haven't edited it yet. So I'm not going to tell you who it is, but it's awesome. Guitar Builder. I think you're going to dig it. We'll see you next time.